the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome every one of you that is here today as we come to study from Torah on what we call the fall feast. And we want to welcome those of you that are joining us through our streaming medias. And we are preparing for the fall feast. Now, the fall feast is a misnomer, just like the 7 feasts of Yaveim are a misnomer. Not all are feasts. And so probably the best, Part 3. Okay. We are preparing for the fall feast. It says part 3, but that's a misnomer. We are actually preparing for the fall Moedim. Everybody say Moedim. Because as we're going to look at this, the Moedim versus the feast. Now, we have actually stepped up a notch from calling them Jewish feasts. And many people call them the Feast of the Jews or the Feast of Israel. Well, we've kind of stepped up from the Feast of the Jews or the Feast of Israel to the Feast of Yaveim, which is more correct, very correct. But we need to look at the idea that not all are feasts. The word moed means a target. The root of moed is target. The root of moed is purpose. So a target, when you're aiming at something, that's the target. That's the purpose. That's what something is about. And of course, by extension, an appointment. An appointed time is a target. A reservation, a date, we are targeting something. And every date, every reservation, every appointment has a purpose. So the word moed, get into your mind this idea of target, of purpose, appointment, date, reservation. The word mikra kodesh means a holy convocation. The word mikra means to meet together, to rehearse, a meeting. And of course, a chag is a feast, a festival, a party. So to step up a notch and get just a little more clearer, we need to know that there are 9 appointed times or moedim. 9, not 7. Not 7. There are 9 moedim. There are 9 rehearsals, mikra kodesh. Now, every moed is also a mikra kodesh. So there are 9 appointments. There are 9 targets. Throughout the year, there are 9 targets. There are 9 rehearsals. Every target is a rehearsal where we rehearse something. And remember, these are cyclical. When we start, we go around, and we end, and we start again. And again, this is repetition. One of the most important aspects of Hebraic learning is repetition. When you repeat something, it gets in there, and every time you repeat it, you don't have to memorize something. If you repeat it often enough, it becomes second nature. And that's what we want. We want the feast and the moedim, the chagim, to be second nature. Of the 9 appointed times, of the 9 rehearsals, 4 of them are chagim. Everybody say chagim. A chag is a festival, a feast, a party. Every chag is party time. And there are 4 party times in Israel. Not all the moedim are chagim. All the chagim are moedim, but not all of them are feasts. Now, 3 of the appointed times, 3 of the feasts are also pilgrim times, or regelim. The word regelim means to walk. It comes from regel, the foot, the ankle, to be able to walk. And so a pilgrim is someone who walks. So there are 3 walking times where you're supposed to walk or take a pilgrimage to Jerusalem at 3 of the times, and we're going to look at them. Now, there are 6 special Shabbats, 6 special Sabbaths. Now, today, the special Sabbaths are called high Sabbath, but they're not really high Sabbath. They are actually low Sabbath. I call it low Sabbath. Now, there's one weekly Sabbath today. Today is a weekly Sabbath. So we are now having a day of ceasing, a day of rest. But this is one time a week. But 6 times during the year, there are other Sabbaths. Now, I call them low Sabbaths because there are things you could do there that you can't do like today. And we'll look at those later on. And then there's one Sabbath of Sabbaths. One Sabbath of Sabbath. So there's 3 kinds of Sabbaths. Your weekly Sabbath, your low Sabbaths, and your Sabbath of Sabbath. So there are 3 kinds of Sabbath. Now, all the Sabbaths are also Moedim. They're part of the Moedim. They're part of the Mikra Kodesh. But they're not feasts, and not all of them are pilgrim feasts or together. So this is a little deeper. This is a little more accurate than, well, there's 7 feasts of Israel. And most of the time when you see books on the feasts, the 7 feasts of the Jews, or the 7 feasts of Israel, or the 7 feasts of Yaveim, which is more correct. But, again, there are 9 appointed times of Yaveim. There are 9 Mikra Kodesh of Yaveim. There are 4 feasts of Yaveim. There are 3 pilgrim times of Yaveim. There's 1 weekly Sabbath of Yaveim. There are 6 special Sabbaths of Yaveim. And there's 1 Sabbath of Yaveim. Okay. And again, this is something that every one of us should have now in the back of our minds. Now, again, these are the main 7 Moedim of Yaveim that we look to, that we do throughout the year. The Feast of Passover is Chag Pesach. Say with me, Chag Pesach. Now, Passover is a feast. You shall celebrate it as a feast. Now, when you think of feast, think of food. When you think of festival, think of food. Party time, food. And so Passover, we have 2 kinds of foods in Passover. We have the ritual foods, which in the days of our holy temple, it included Korban Pesach, which was the Passover lamb, and other unleavened bread, bitter herbs that were part of the ritual foods. Only those 3 things were part of the ritual foods. Only those 3 things. Not an egg, not parsley, not all kinds of other additions. Okay. But then there was a celebratory meal, which could be made up of all kinds of other foods. You could have there a chagigah lamb, an extra lamb. You could have beef. You could have chicken. You could have rice. The celebratory meal, you could have whatever you want. Now, the second feast is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Say with me, Chag Chamatzah. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a 7-day feast. And it's a time when, especially those that came to Jerusalem. Now, notice that I have an asterisk there, and that means it's a pilgrim feast. And so family would come, and they would, for 1 week, they would rejoice after Passover, and they would enjoy one another and have festival time there in Jerusalem. Then the day of first fruits, say with me, Yom Reshit. This is the day of first fruits. It's a Bekurim, which means that they would bring the first of the barley harvest. And then we have the Feast of Week, Chag Shavuot. Say with me, Chag Shavuot. This is the feast. Again, another time, and you notice it has an asterisk, which means it's a regalim. We would come to Jerusalem, our ancestors would come to Jerusalem and have a feast on that day. And then you have the Feast of Trumpets, which is Yom Trua. Say with me, Yom Trua. Okay? And again, that's the day of a blast. And then you have a Day of Atonement. Say with me, Yom HaKippurim. The word Kippur is covering. It's not Yom Kippur, the day of covering. It's actually Yom HaKippurim, the day of the coverings. And so the Feast of Tabernacles, say with me, Chag Sukkot. And that is the Feast of Tabernacles for 1 week. So unleavened bread, Shavuot, and Sukkot, all three are pilgrim feasts. And most people, if you came for this, you didn't have to come to Jerusalem for Passover unless you wanted to eat the Passover. The Passover could not be eaten any place outside of Jerusalem. It had to be in Jerusalem. The Feast of Unleavened Bread only in Jerusalem. The Feast of Weeks only in Jerusalem. And the Feast of Tabernacles only in Jerusalem. Now, the Day of Atonement in biblical times was actually a day when you stayed home. And later on, they started going to the synagogue and praying on that day. But this was pretty much a day when you just stayed home for the 24 hours. And, of course, the Day of Trumpets, you could do it any place. First fruits, if you wanted to bring a first fruits, you'd bring it to Jerusalem. Only in Jerusalem could you bring your first fruits. But you could also send your first fruits with others. And so, but these are days when you must come. So since these are in a 1 week time, most people would come all three, the Feast of Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the Day of First Fruits in Jerusalem. They would do that. Now, to look at this even further, we have the 9 Moedim of Yahweh. These are the 9 Moedim. Each one of this is a Moed. You have the Sabbath. Now, go with me to Leviticus chapter 23. We do this all the time, but again, repetition. Repetition. Of 23:1. Yahweh spoke to Moses, and he said, "Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, the Moedim of Yahweh." Now, regardless of what your scripture says in English, whether it's the seasons or the festivals or the feasts, or in the Hebrew says the Moedim of Yahweh, to which you summon them, are sacred assemblies or Mikra Kodesh. So the Moedim are Mikra Kodesh. The Moedim are Mikra Kodesh. These are my Moedim. In verse 2, you may work for 6 days, but the 7th must be a day of complete ceasing. Wherever you live, a day of Mikra Kodesh, sacred assembly, holy convocation in other translations, on which you do no work at all. Wherever you live, this is a Sabbath for Yahweh. And so the first Moed is the Sabbath, Yom HaShabbat, and that's weekly. The rest of them, as you see, are yearly, but this is weekly. But it's a Moed. These are my Moedim, it says. And then it begins with number 1, the Sabbath there in verse 3. It's and then in verse 4, these are Yahweh's Moedim, the sacred assemblies which you are to summon the sons of Israel on the appointed day. Then it starts off with the Feast of Passover and the Feast of Passover. Then it goes to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Day of First Fruits, the Feast of Weeks, the Day of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles, which are the 7 Moedim that we look to on a yearly basis. But look at this. Not only is the Sabbath counted as one of the Moedim, but at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles, you have the 8th day meeting. Shemini Asaret. Shemini means 8th day or 8th. It's the word for 8th. And then Asaret is to meet. So it's a separate meeting. Now, today we usually combine Feast of Tabernacles as an 8-day celebration. But if you notice in Scripture, it specifically cuts out the 8th day and on the 8th day. And so technically there are 9, even though we say the 7 Moedim, and it's correct to say 7 Moedim, there's nothing wrong saying, because those are the ones that we cycle yearly, and the 7 Moedim, and then we combine the 8th day with the Feast of Tabernacles. So Tabernacles is only 7 days, but there's 8th day. Now what's interesting is that for the 7 feasts, you have 1 and 7, then you have 7 and 8, and one more, an 8th. And so these are the 9 Moedim of Yahweh. Again, to be more precise, to look at it from Leviticus, the whole of Leviticus 23. Now, the 9 Moedim of Yahweh, definitely on the Sabbath, is a day of complete no work, complete no work, complete rest, complete ceasing of everything. And it's only a 1 day today. From sundown last night, sundown on Friday night, to sundown on what we call Saturday night is the Sabbath. It began last night. It will end today as the sun goes down. Now, as the sun goes down, you are welcome to go and shop. You're welcome to go and go to a restaurant, things like that. In Israel, right before the Sabbath comes in, as the sun is going down, everything, all the shops start closing up, getting ready for the Shabbat, and then the Shabbat occurs. And then as soon as Shabbat ends, as soon as the 3 stars, the twilight shows up, all the shops open up, and everybody goes to the squares, and everybody's out there eating and talking and fellowshipping at the end of the Sabbath. Of course, Passover is a work day. You could work on Passover day, on the 14th of Aviv, and it's only a 1 day. The Feast of Passover is 1 day. I know in today's world, Passover has become a 2-day. They have a first Seder and a second Seder, but in biblical times, only 1 Seder was done at the beginning of the day, not at the end of the day like it is today. In Rabbinical Judaism again, it's at the end of the 14th, and in biblical times, it was at the beginning of the 14th. So things have changed over the years from what Scripture says, because we as humans tend to add and take away according to our convenience and change things around. Now, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, again, is times 2. There are 2 days of no work. It's 7 days. So the 1st and the 7th day, so the 15th and the 21st are days of no work, the 1st and the 7th. You don't work on those 2 days. And so it's Feast of Unleavened Bread is a 7-day time of no work. Again, this is a low Sabbath. This is a regular Sabbath. This is a special Sabbath, or a low Sabbath, as I call them, the 1st and 7th day of this. Now, the day of first fruits, it's not a Sabbath. It's 1 day. Now, the day of first fruits will always be on a Yom Rishon. Yom, day, Rishon, first. So the day of first fruits, or Bekurim, will always go on the first day of the week, which in the Roman calendar, both Julian and Gregorian, is called Sunday, the day of the sun. So first fruits will always be on a Sunday. 50 days later, the Feast of First Fruits, the Feast of Weeks, 50 days later, from First Fruits, it's 50 days to the Feast of Weeks, and that's a Hag, that's a feast. And it's a day of no work. That's a low Sabbath. That's a low Sabbath. And that'll always be a Sunday also. 50 days from first fruits, Yom Rishon, first day of the week, Sunday, to Feast of Weeks, Yom Rishon, first day of the week, Sunday. And again, that's just a one day. Again, if you see the asterisk, that's a regalim. Feast of Weeks is a regalim. And then you have the Day of Trumpets. The Day of Trumpets, which is a day of no work. Again, a low Sabbath. It's one day. The Day of Atonement, it's no work. Now, this is not just no work, but this is no work. This is the Sabbath of Sabbath. This is not just a day of no work, but it's a day that you just afflict your soul. You don't do anything. There's certain things that you do on any regular Sabbath. Like on a Sabbath, you could eat. On a low Sabbath, you could eat, or special Sabbath, you could eat. But on Feast of Tabernacle, on Day of Atonement, you fast that day. You afflict your soul. You just lay low and look at what Adonai is doing in your life, as we're going to see when we get that in a couple of weeks. And of course, the Feast of Tabernacles, the first day of the 7 days is no work. The first day only. And it's a 7-day period. But the 8th day meeting, the Shemini Aseret, one day, that's a day of no work. So the first and 8th day are low Sabbaths. Again, we don't work on those days. And we will look at some of the differences between the ceasing Sabbath and just the no work Sabbath. We cease from all labor on the Sabbath, and we cease from all labor on the Day of Atonement. But these other days of no work, we just don't do what Scripture calls servile work or laborious work. You don't go to your regular job. You don't do your regular things. But there's certain things that you can do. And again, at each one, we'll discuss what you can and can't do on those days. Now, what we just talked about right now, the coming Moedim, we have Yom Teruah. This is the first day of the 7th month. Okay, we're preparing for the fall Moedim, the coming Moedim. The first fall Moed is Yom Teruah, which is the first day of the 7th month. The second fall Moed is Yom Kippur, or Yom HaKippurim, and this is the 10th day of the 7th month. And then the third Moed is Chag Sukkot, and this is the first day of the 7th month. And remember, Sukkot is 7 days long. 7 days long. But Shemini Aseret is the 8th day, and that means 8th day meeting. Aseret means to meet, and then Shemini means 8th. So there are 4 spring Moedim, and there are 3 fall Moedim, which makes the 7 Moedim. And of course, if you want to call this an 8th Moedim, most people put Shemini Atzeret with Chag Sukkot, making it an 8-day celebration. Now, the thing to remember is Adonai is always precise, because remember, the Moedim are about Yeshua. The Moedim are about Yeshua. They're about his body, about who he is. They reflect Yeshua. They're shadows of Yeshua. There are pictures of Yeshua. They bring out Yeshua in an audio-visual manner to the world. So we're not talking about just Jewish celebrations. A lot of people say, well, you guys focus too much on the Jewish feasts. No, it's not about Jewish feasts. These were not given to the Jews. These were given to Israel. After the breakup of Israel and Judaism, and the Jews have become, in a sense, the only tribe, so to speak, they have taken care of them. They've taken care of them. And in them taking care of them, yes, additions and subtractions took place. But I really believe that we are in the days of restoration, even within Judaism, even within some of these areas, that Adonai is restoring us back to the Mosaic. And we're going to look at the Mosaic protocols today. And then next week, we are going to look at the Messianic Apostolic protocols. We might get into some of those today, but we'll look at more of that next week. But these are the coming Moedim. Now notice that there are 10 days between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. 10 days. Now, as I am saying some of this, teaching some of this, some of you in the audience, or some of you that are especially listening through our YouTube channel, might be saying, wait a second, you didn't say Yom Teruah is this. You didn't talk about the 10 days. No. I'm strictly going by what the scriptures teach. This is the outline of the scriptures. This is what it says, as we're going to read it verse by verse in a little while. But there are 10 days between here. Now, for those of you that are here in our teaching center, on this side, we have some photographs, very lovely photographs that one of our members actually got permission from the author of a book to copy in large format, and they framed them all very beautifully. But it begins back there with Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost or weeks. So there are 4 spring feasts. Every spring feast, I want to tell you, occurred literally by the day. So the first one, Passover, was on the 14th of Aviv. Next day, the 15th of Aviv. And then on the Sabbath after Passover, we have the day of first fruits. And then 50 days, we have the Feast of Weeks. They occurred exactly, literally by the time. Yeshua died on Passover. He was buried on unleavened bread. He rose on first fruits, and he sent his Holy Spirit on Pentecost 50 days later. Exactly. So my thesis, my understanding is that if the first spring feast occurred literally, grammatically, historically, because that's historic, they're a done deal. Yeshua fulfilled them. My thesis on that is that the fall feasts are going to be fulfilled literally, grammatically, and historically. You can't say this is literal, grammatical, historic, but this, we could change things around. This is just, we could make the 10 days into 7 years. No, we can't do that. If we couldn't do it here, we can't do it here. So part of my foundation for the next weeks and to the end of Sukkot is that I believe in a literal, grammatical, historical fulfillment of all the feasts. And so there are 10 days between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. There are 5 days between Yom Kippur and Chag Sukkot. And then the next day is Shemini Asaret. So we're talking here a 15-day period. The 7th month, now remember, in Hebrew, the Hebrew calendar, we have a Hebrew calendar of 12 lunar months. 12 lunar months. Of the 12 lunar months, the calendar has a parenthesis of 7 months. Of 7 months. From Aviv, the 1st month, to Tishri, the 7th month. And so the feasts of Yahweh are in this 7-month period from Aviv to Tishri, from the 1st month to the 7th month. And the other months, after the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, that's winter. Notice that all the feasts, when we've studied the feasts, all 7 feasts are in the agricultural part of the year. And it's interesting that the 2 celebrations of Hanukkah and Purim are in what we would call the winter section or the cold section. But these feasts of Yahweh are in the agricultural. And this is the end of the agricultural time, the agricultural year. And after Sukkot and Shemini Asaret, in a sense, the rains begin. And this is the second turn of the year. The year turns twice, in March and in September. So in September, now, interesting about the Gregorian, Julian, Roman calendar. Even though they've added to the names of the calendar some pagan gods like January, February, and all those, and they've added names like July for Julius Caesar and August for Augustus. Notice that in the fall, deep within the trappings of the Roman calendar, you still see the ancient biblical calendar of September, October, November, December. September in Latin is what? 7. October, 8. November, 9. December, 10. So September is the 7th month. That's when the year turns. October is the 8th month. November is the 9th month. December is the 10th month. December is not the 12th month. Look in the trappings. It's the 10th month. And so even within the Roman calendar, in its Gregorian or Julian modes, still has the biblical, the beginning of time, where Adonai measured the months by number 1, 2, 3. So the 7th month, and 7, like the menorah, like creation, Adonai ceased on the 7th day. 7 is the number of ceasing. Adonai ceased, and that began a motif for all time, that you complete things by 7s. So we have a 7-day week because Adonai completed. Last week we were talking about calendar. We said that the day is astronomical. It's one revolution of the earth around itself. The moon is astronomical. It's one revolution of the moon around the earth. The sun, in relation to the earth, is astronomical because the earth revolves one time around the sun. Those are astronomical. But the week is not astronomical. The only reason we have a week is because Adonai completed the work. And so in the 7 months, the seventh month completes Adonai's agricultural provision for the world, but it completes his message about Yeshua, about his first coming and his second coming. And those of you that are especially interested, because everybody says, we're in the last days, we're in the last days. Well, we've been in the last days since Yeshua came. After he came, those are the last days. We're actually not in the last days. We're in the last hours, if not the last minutes, from what we're seeing. But it's important for us to know about these and look at Yeshua. Now, we've done this for the spring feast. We're going to do it now for the fall feast. And so what's important for us to note is that in the coming fall Moedim, and for some reason this doesn't want to work. There we go. Okay. The resurrection rapture, and again, I'm going ahead for you to throw out my thesis, but the resurrection rapture will occur on Yom Teruah, on the first day of the 7th month. That's when the resurrection rapture will occur. 10 days later, the second coming will occur. And then, 5 days later, the millennial kingdom will occur. And then after the millennial kingdom, eternity begins. Eternity begins. So Yom Teruah, the resurrection will occur on the first day of the 7th month. 10 days later, the second coming will occur on Yom Kippur, the 10th of the 7th month. And then 5 days later, the millennial kingdom, Chag Sukkot. And that should be the 15th of the 7th month. That should be the 15th of the 7th month. That my secretary again messed up, and I need to get a new secretary there. 7 days. Whoa. 7 days, and then the 7 days long, and then the 8th day is eternity. Now, I'm throwing this out just to kind of get your minds thinking, because remember, most of us, as we're going to see a picture of, are dispensational. If you come from a Protestant evangelical Christian background, which most of us have, and many of us came from a Roman Catholic or regular Protestant, Reformed, evangelical. And in the evangelical world, the idea of dispensational model is where the rapture occurs 7 days, 70 years before the second coming. Don't raise your hands, but how many of you were part of that? I was part of that. I studied with Hal Lindsey, author of The Great Planet Earth. I studied with him in California and graduated from his school in California. So I cut my teeth after being born again on dispensational pre-trib rapture. But by studying the feast, just studying the feast, especially the fall feast. In fact, the fall feast, as I looked upon the 7 Moedim, and I looked at the fall Moedim and said, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. You cannot say that Yeshua died on Passover, was buried on unleavened bread, resurrected on first fruits, sent his Holy Spirit, and then on Yom Teruah, the rapture happens, then 7 years later, the second coming. No, this has to be literal. The 10 days have to be literal. The 5 days have been literal. So this 15-day period from the resurrection rapture, we're going to look at what Yom Teruah is. So look at this chart, and then when we start looking at this in a moment, we will see some of these things. Now, the fall Moedim calendar, again, the biblical versus the rabbinic calendar, the 6th month Elul started at the conjunction of 8/27/22, and again the cited Rosh Chodesh actually was at 8/29/22, and so the 6 months started again for Judaism by the conjunction and by us at the cited Rosh Chodesh, the first cited moon. The 7th month Tishri, where Yom Teruah, the day of the blast or trumpets, I don't know when it's going to be, but it's probably going to be around September 26th, around there. So keep your eyes on that. And of course, Yom Kippurim, in them, they started October 5th. I don't know. Chag Sukkot, I don't know. But around October 10th and 17th. Again, these are, we're projecting these, or these are projections, but we really don't know when this is going to happen. Okay, we really don't know when these are going to happen. So just keep these dates as projections for now. Now we're preparing for Yom Teruah, and this is the day of the blast. My names for Moed Teruah, again, there's all kinds of names. If you look at the internet, there's all kinds of names. These are some of the names that I use for Moed Teruah. Of course, biblically, it's the day of the blast and shout, the sound, the day of the sound. And that's what, go with me to Leviticus 23, and go to verse 23. Yahweh spoke to Moses, and he said, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, the first day of the 7th month shall be a day of ceasing for you, a sacred assembly, proclaimed with trumpet call, Teruah, the call, the blast of the Teruah. You must do no heavy work, and you must offer a burnt offering to Yahweh. So this is biblical, the day of the blast, the shout, the sound. But it's also the day of the shofar, because the word blast and shout also mean to sound, to shout with a shofar. Now, this is also what I call a day of expectation. To expect something means you're waiting for it to come. You want it to come. You're longing for it. Whenever you order a package, you wait. You go to the mailbox. Maybe you're waiting for something to occur. You wait. You even get anxious, and you keep looking at your watch or the calendar. You want it to come. Well, Moed Teruah is a day of expectation. We want it to come. We want it to come. They don't want it to come. We want it to come because of some of the things that are going to occur. Now, if you notice, it's also a day of mystery. I call it a mystery feast because if you go to Leviticus 23, there's reasons for every Moed. Every Moed has a reason. This is the only Moed that has no reason. What is the reason? It's not agricultural. It's not historical. It's not theological. Some of the Moedim are theological. Some of them are historical. Some of them are agricultural. But what is Moed Teruah? It doesn't tell you. It's a mystery. And remember, what is a mystery? A mystery is something that is hidden that will be revealed in the future. And it's a mystery because, again, we don't know when it's going to occur. We don't know the day or the hour. So we must always be ready. Yom Teruah is also a day of judgment. You're expecting something. We're expecting something good that day. But is it going to be a day of judgment? When the trumpet sounds, there will be judgment on the world. It's also a day of deliverance, where Adonai is going to deliver. It's a day of the resurrection rapture. So each of these, we will go through each of these next week and some of the things that it means, but I just want to throw these things out so that you could kind of like my raw materials things. I'm just throwing you some raw materials so that you could go and study. By the way, again, in the internet, you'll have all kinds of, especially rabbinic things of what this day is, and the scales are, all that stuff. We don't know where those come. We know where these come from. We know where every one of these come from. Now, the Moed of expectation, Joel 2:1. Blow the shofar in Sion. Sound the alarm on my holy mountain. Let everybody in the country tremble, for the day of Yahweh is coming. Yes, it is near. Why tremble? Because this is also going to be a day of judgment. Now we're expecting it to us. Blessed are they that have heard the joyful sound. We're going to look at. But we will hear the joyful sound. We will rejoice on that day. But for them, for others, they're going to tremble on that day because it's a day of judgment. Now, that's the shofar that was stolen from me. That was my shofar there. These are biblical protocols for Yom Teruah. We just read these biblical protocols. Now, the first day of the 7th month. Okay, remember, first day of the what month? 7th month. Remember, this is September. Yom Teruah usually occurs in September. Again, from the biblical lunar perspective, but yet even in the secular calendars, it's the 7th, it's September 7. Not the first month. Again, Yom Teruah is not Rosh Hashanah. Do not let anybody tell you Yom Teruah is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is in spring. Oops. If you say, Rosh Hashanah or, have a good year, you're 7 months late. It's the first day of the 7th month. Biblically, it's 7th month. What about 7 can we not understand? And again, the new moon is what begins the first day of the 7th month, and it's a crescent moon on the western horizon. So on that day, if it's the 26th, we're going to look because we don't know. I don't know exactly. I'm going to start looking on the 25th or 24th, even though there'll be dark moons and, excuse me, we'll be looking. But the advantage that we have here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, is that we're 8 hours behind Israel. So we have the advantage, like in ancient days where they would do the fires from the temple to the Mount of Olives and all around. We have from Israel when they saw the moon and once they see the moon. And so on that day, we're all going to come and we gather together here. We gather together in our parking lot here. And everybody has their shofars. Everybody has their throats ready to shout. We bring some goodies. We celebrate. It's a day to celebrate this day and the coming in of the new moon. And as soon as that new moon comes up, a Sabbath begins. Because remember, that is a Sabbath day, nor servile work, almost a Shabbat. There's certain things that we could do. We could make food and things like that. But we don't do hard laborious work on that day. So the second protocol is that we don't work. First is that it is the first of the seventh month. And then it's a day of Mikra Kodesh. Now, a lot of people have this idea about the festivals, the Moedim, the Chagim, the Regalim, all whatever these are. They have the idea that, oh, I could do this by myself. Yes, some of them you can do by yourself. There's no problem with that. But remember, Adonai calls this a day of Mikra Kodesh. The word Mikra Kodesh, again, is holy convocation or set apart meeting, a rehearsal time where we come to rehearse. If I have a symphony and I want to bring the symphony to some big hall, Carnegie Hall or someplace, I gather the symphony together, the violin section, the horns, the woodwinds, the drums, the percussion, all the strings. I gather them all, and all together have to practice. Can you imagine if the woodwinds are practicing over there in one room, and somebody's practicing, the trumpets are practicing in the mountains, and the drums in the river, and everybody's, one guy by himself, I could do this, I could do the cymbals by myself in my basement or whatever. And we will never be together. We could never make the sound together. Yes, you have individual practice time at home, but that doesn't mean that you have to not gather together in sacred rehearsal. Right now we're rehearsing. In fact, we're rehearsing right now for our eternal Shabbat. Every time we meet for Shabbat on Sabbath, we're rehearsing for our eternal Shabbat Shalom. That's what we're doing. It's also a memorial, a remembrance. And look what it says. It's a day of memorial. It's a memorial of what? Nobody knows. This is what makes it a mystery. This is the only feast that doesn't tell you why. It's a day to come and remember. Now, what is Memorial Day? Here in the United States, we have Memorial Day. Memorial Day, unknown to many people, is the day to remember the fallen soldiers. It's not a day to remember the dead. Everybody goes to the cemeteries for grandma and all these people on Memorial Day. But it's not what it's for. It's a day to remember the fallen dead, the military fallen dead. It's a day of remembrance. We have other days of remembrance. 4th of July in the secular calendar is a day of remembrance. What do we remember on 4th of July? Independence Day. Anniversary. We have anniversary. Anybody ever have an anniversary? It's a day of remembrance. It's a day you remember. That's the day you got married, or that's the day you graduated, or that's the day you got ordained. It's anniversary, an annual remembrance. This is an annual remembrance for what? Nobody knows. Everybody has some ideas. I have my own idea. You know what I think this is a remembrance of? Can I tell you what I think it's a remembrance of? It's a remembrance of the giving of the Torah on Sinai. You say, wait a second. No. Oh, you're really wrong. Don't you know that's at Shavuot? We celebrate the giving of the Torah on Shavuot. But I want you to do, again, this is a study we've done before. I want you to do a study on how long it took from Ramses till they got to Sinai. Now, if you look at it, we're looking at 60 days. But Shavuot is 50 days. So it couldn't have been the giving of the Torah. But if you remember, Moses goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. So from when they got there, after Shavuot, this is the right time. And you remember it with trumpet blast. Anybody know what happened at Sinai? Not when Moses went up to get the tablets of stones, but when he just got there. And all of a sudden, what happened? All of a sudden, Moses was downstairs. He wasn't upstairs. He was downstairs under the mountain with the people. And all of a sudden, there was thunder. There was lightning. There was shaking. And there was a sound of a shofar blast that it says they saw the sound. What? The scripture says they saw the sound. Have you ever tasted color? Only in Wonka land can you taste color. But Hebrews says that they saw the sound of the shofar blast. And all of a sudden, the Adonai spoke out the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments were given orally, audibly from the top of the mountain with the sound of a shofar. And now we are asked that we remember the sound of the shofar. It's a day of remembrance of the shofar. The only time I know about the shofar blast is Sinai. And then 10 days later, it's a day of what? It's a day of contrition. That's the day you give your act of contrition before Adonai. And you humble yourself before Adonai. And then 5 days later is a day of rejoicing that the king has arrived. So Adonai prepares you, and the day of the shofar blast is the day of the covenant. It's the covenant day. We remember the covenant, and the covenant was so loud, as Adonai spoke. Ani Yahweh Elohecha, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery, the house of furnace. You shall have no other Elim before me. And goes on and on and on with the 10 covenant words. So that's what I think. Now, teruah means acclamations, a shout, a blast, a ram's horn, 3 blasts. And these are the 3 blasts of the ram's horn. The tekaya, which is announcement, 1 long blast. The shevarim, to assemble, 3 short blasts. Teruah, alarm, 9 or more short staccato blasts. And we're going to look at this. Now, the other thing is the sacrifices. We don't have a temple. So right now we are exempt from sacrifices because we don't have a temple. But when the temple is up again, then the sacrificial system will begin again, and we will continue the sacrifices when we receive our new temple. Now, Matthew 25:13, Yeshua says, "Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day or the hour." This is the only new moon when we don't know. This is the only Moed when we don't know when the Christian's going to show up. We don't know the day, and we don't know the hour when this is going to show up. It's going to show up. We think it's going to be the 26th. We could calculate it. But again, many times we've calculated, and what happens? It's the wrong day. And we've been wrong. Because we have to be trushas. We have to be ready. We have to be alert. And even Yeshua tells us that when he comes, we have to be on the alert because we don't know the day and the hour. This is the only day and hour that nobody knows. Now, this is what I was telling you a while ago. This is a dispensational model. This is what most people believe, that Yeshua died, and we're in the gospel age right now, and that the rapture is going to occur, the Bema seat, the rewards, and then Yeshua's 7-year tribulation. Yeshua's going to come back. The kingdom's going to start for 1,000 years, the battle of Gog and Magog, the last judgment, new heavens, new earth, eternity, Satan bound, and then thrown into the lake of fire. This is what most Christians believe. But I'm going to say this is wrong. And it's wrong. And my worry is that if everybody's depending on the rapture and then we have anti-Messiah showing up here, then there's going to be great apostasy upon the world. Of course, this is my understanding of, and again, we'll go more about this later on. As we close here, I want to do a couple of show and tell here. Of course, this is the shofar. This is a ram's horn. What, like that? Or the other way? One of these. I actually have two of them the same, from the same on both sides. I have two of the same one. But this is a ram's horn. Now, when most people look at a shofar, these long, I believe this is what, from an ibex or something like that, a ram. This is still a ram's horn from a male ibex. But really, in biblical times, this is what the ram's horn was. Of course, the priests use silver trumpets. They use silver trumpets. To announce things. It's used to assemble. It's used to alarm. Now, the announcement is one long blast, and I don't know if you ever remember the church bells. They used to use church bells in different places. I served in the Navy, so we had all kinds of different calls, what they called the bosun's whistle, different calls from the bosun's whistle, the trumpet, different beep, 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 and, different sounds. General quarters, all hands man your battle stations. They had different calls. In a sense, that's what this is. That's what this is. And so there are different sounds. The sound of tekaya, everybody say tekaya, is one long blast. By the way, if you want to learn how to do shofar, we'll have a class during Sukkot on how to do the shofar. But I hope I don't look funny. Well, I look funny anyway, but but to learn how to do the shofar, it's always from the right side. It's not from the front. You don't do it that way. You do it from the side, right side here. And you go like this. Okay. Everybody do this so that I'm not alone. Can you try that? Everybody in the audience, do that at home. Remember, it's just, there's nothing in there. There's no little buttons in here, what do you call those? I'm not a musician, so I never knew anything about trumpets or anything like that. It's just, if you just blow into it, it's just, but it's very simple, very easy. So the tekaya is this. One long blast. The Shevarim is 3 short blasts. And then the teruah, the alarm, is 9 or more short staccato blasts. And then the tekaya gadol is 1 long blast as long as you can hold out. Now, some people with a lot of hot air in them could really do it. Have you heard someone with a lot of hot air in them? And so let's do all 3 of them together. And I should actually be standing, but and again, I'm not an expert shofar blower. There's some guys out there that really blow it really good, especially some of the long ones, some of the long shofars. But that's the shofar, and I want to start getting everybody take off to Israel, go buy one, and bring it back. If not, there are several places. The Cornerstone Bookstore, 1716 St. Michael's Drive in Santa Fe, and there's their phone number. Ask for Joe. I've known Joe for a long time. Tell him that you were sent by me. He'll probably charge you more. But Cornerstone Bookstore has an excellent selection of shofars. And they also have all kinds of Judaica, by the way, if you need menorahs or anything like that. And one of the best selection of Messianic books. Of course, they also have a Roman Catholic section, a Greek Orthodox section, an Evangelical section, a Reformed section. They have different sections Joe has there at the Cornerstone Bookstore. In fact, if you're ever in Santa Fe, drop by there. Just looking at all the things he has, especially for Messianics, is good. We also have the Jerusalem Marketplace. In the Jerusalem Marketplace, Sandy Martin usually comes every year. This year, she's not able to come to Sukkot, but they are out of Las Cruces, New Mexico, and you could probably look at for them someplace there in Facebook or in the internet, called the Jerusalem Marketplace. And her husband he actually makes shofars. So if you need some really nice shofars, he gets raw shofars from Israel, and again, makes them and puts them into. Now, when you're selecting a shofar, by the way, let me give you a nice little hint. Always make sure they are not round, but oval. The more oval you can get it, the better it is for the shofar to be on your lips. And so Adonai wants us to have the joyful sound, to hear the joyful sound, and to be part of this. So next week, we will continue our study on Yom Teruah, and be able to have a blessed hearing of the joyful sound. Let's go ahead and stand before Adonai. And I hope I gave you enough raw material here, Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or torahunleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en torahunleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.